What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. It's game week 36 time, the biggest double game week of the entire season. We've got 12 teams, 12 major teams doubling, and it's exciting times. I think all of us have, close to 10 or 11 double game week players in our team, so exciting times. I'm joined by Ryan. How are you, bud?
I'm doing well, Ted. I'm still buzzing after Captain Son came in for me this game week. So the game week didn't start off too well. I was looking at a fairly big red arrow. I think at one point I was on 6 points from 5 players. So a fairly dismal game week, but it was saved by Son, just like many of my game weeks recently. So I'm still feeling pretty good off that. How are you doing?
Oh, Son just ruins my rank just every week. But credit to the players, credit to the managers who have held him. For the last 8 game weeks, he's been absolutely insane. I was one of those awful managers that moved Son to Kane for a -4 like 8 game weeks ago, and it's arguably been one of the worst moves. But it's difficult to fathom, isn't it? Because the change in team structure might have enabled me to gather some of the points, like Foden this week, Foden a couple of game weeks ago. It allowed me to bring in an extra midfield player. So it's difficult to monitor, but 100% I would be down on if I didn't make that move. But yes, I was coming back from a stag do this weekend, and I set off in the car and saw Kane that scored that first goal, and I was like, "Oh, it's a really good start." And then I saw when I finished the journey, 3-1 Spurs. I was like, "Come on, Harry Kane hat trick! Come on!" No, Son 2 goals and assists, unbelievable. And big contribution to like a rank drop, but yet we are both on green arrows. It's good news. Top 10k finish is still on the horizon for me. And what's your aim, Ryan? Your 50k surely is achievable in the last 3 game weeks.
Well, I don't know. I mean, at the start of this game week, I was 120k. So Son has contributed to almost a 30k rank rise for me. I'm all out this game week, so I'm expecting that rank to drop a little bit after tomorrow's game or today's game, wherever you're watching. United and Brentford. Sorry, I don't think. I mean, there's probably a Ronaldo or a Tony owner out there that might be able to drop my rank. But look, I'm just hoping for top 100k. It's been a really difficult season. I was over on FPL Review's site the other day and looking at the variance that has gone on in my team this season, and I think I'm on a -52 score for variance. So yeah, basically I've got a reason as to why I've been so bad or so unlucky, I guess you could say, this season. But you mentioned top 50k. I'm only 35 points away from top 50k. So I think that's doable. I don't have any chips left though, and I'm thinking this week I'm going to get left behind by quite a few chips.
Well, I think it's perfectly achievable if you set your team out correctly this game week. And had a sneak peek earlier. It looks very good. So we'll see what happens. I think, keep your fingers crossed and keep making those logical decisions as FPL Review was stating. And hopefully the variance goes your way the last 3 game weeks of the season. But yes, let's get into it. And we're going to talk all things double game week this video. So all the teams and players we'll be focusing on are the players that double in game week 36. Plenty to get through, but before we get into that, word from the sponsors, SoRare Academy. If you like fantasy games, have a look at this. You pick 5 players across the top 5 European leagues. I haven't updated the metric at the bottom here because I haven't been able to get a new metric, but basically you pick 5 different players, goalkeeper to forwards, across the top 5 European leagues. And if you do well over the weekend, score lots of points, same fantasy premise, you get to win these SoRare cards, which are like worth some money, and you can build a team and battle other people and play tournaments in the SoRare game. So if you like fantasy stuff, check it out. It's completely free to play this SoRare Academy game. So give it a go. Right, beforehand, I've noticed I just haven't updated this presenter overlay. Oh, I'm going to do that quickly. Here we go. Nice. Okay, right, let's get into it. God, what a shocker that's thrown me now.
Yeah, it's got me on a red arrow.
I know, unbelievable. I've forgotten to update that one, but it's fine. We will get straight into it, and let's have a look at the fixtures. So instead of the usual team graphics, we've got a fixtures metric here, which just shows the 12 teams that have a double this game week. Their XG is across the bottom, and this is since the 1st of January 2022. So basically, since the start of the second half of the season. And I thought that's like sufficiently long time period to sort of give the teams that have had a bit of a bounce since then, like the likes of Newcastle, a fresh start. I don't want to look at the last 6 because it's too small a sample size. I don't want to look until the start of the season because it loses a bit of trend. So since the 1st of Jan, we're looking at this. Teams with their XG across the bottom, their opponents, their 2 opponents combined XG conceded. So their defensive stats, their opponents' defensive stats are added up and they're across the top. So we basically, if a team is in the top right, they've got a really high XG, a really high attacking stats against 2 really poor opponents. Now, there aren't any teams in the top right because there isn't that perfect marriage of really high attack versus really poor defence. But you can see a clear trend. You've got Chelsea, Arsenal, City and Liverpool in that line, which almost state that they're all really good options this week. And, you don't need this chart to know that, Ryan. Obviously, we should caveat that we think that Chelsea's double is likely to be a little bit more uneventful than the other 3 teams because that second fixture, we're likely to see heavy rotation. Having said that, and I want to get your thoughts on this, now that they lost to Everton and Arsenal won, there is a chance that Chelsea have to play full strength in their double just to keep the wolf from their door. Now, what do you think? Is that going to happen or rotation rife?
Yeah, I think that defeat to Everton was probably good news for fantasy managers who have Chelsea assets because they're only 5 points, I think, in front of Arsenal now, and Tottenham are just behind that as well. So I think there's only like a 4 or 5 point gap between Chelsea and Arsenal and Spurs in 4th and 5th. So the pressure's on. I mean, it feels like top 4 is fairly secure for Chelsea, but the longer these dropped points continue to go on and Arsenal and Spurs breathing down their neck, anything can happen. And I think Thomas Tuchel will want to secure top 4 as soon as he can. I expect to see a fairly strong team in that Wolves fixture. As you say, we do expect rotation against Leeds. That game comes just a few days before the FA Cup final. They've got a couple of nice fixtures on the other side of this double game week. I think they've got Leicester and then they've got Watford, I think, in game week 38. So, Thomas Tuchel probably looks at those 2 fixtures and thinks that they can get maximum points out of that. It's not panic stations just yet. But yeah, certainly that first fixture against Wolves, that's a really nice fixture.
Yeah, they've been sort of poor recently, Wolves. It seems like they massively overperformed in the first half of the season. And since then, it's been evening itself out and they've been really underperforming. 3 goals conceded to Brighton just says it all, really. So at least it's a good first fixture for Chelsea. And then probably what will happen, I don't know. I'm not a Chelsea fan. I'm sure Chelsea fans know a little bit more about it than I do. But I would guess that the more injury prone recovery rate, fewer players, etc., like Reece James, who have been struggling with an injury worry, he's probably more likely to be rotated in that second game. The players that maybe play game in, game out, like Mason Mount, maybe Kai Havertz, depending on whether his form continues to fall, those guys might still be in the team against Leeds. So I don't think it will be a full change. I think it will just be the key players playing for Chelsea. And so would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, what would you consider to be a full change? Because Leicester, for example, they made 8 changes against Spurs. I think that's probably as close to a full change as we might see from Thomas Tuchel. And who are the ones that remain? I mean, if we're talking about the key fantasy assets, right? If we just start off in defence and move our way forward, let's talk about Reece James, Rudiger, and Alonso. What are your thoughts on those 3 players? Do they play both games? Do they start both? What are your thoughts on James, Rudiger, and Alonso for this double game week?
I think I have more confidence about Alonso just playing sort of every game until the end of the season, to be honest, because there's not really any other proper left backs. And I think he hasn't played a full season either. He's been left out on occasion. Um, it's not going to take its toll as it would do on other players. I think he probably starts every game until the end of the season. I don't think that's the same for Reece James. I'm not sure about Rudiger because, yeah, he's had a little bit of injury worry recently, but if he starts the first game, I think he'll start the second, and then he'll probably continue because he's such a key player as that centre back. So out of the three, I think I'd have more worry about Reece James starting. The other two, I wouldn't be surprised if they just continued to play. But at the same time, it really depends on Tuchel's appetite to rotate. He could rotate that front three. He could bring in Ziyech, Lukaku, and Pulisic, and play like a Loftus-Cheek and whoever in midfield, and then play Aspi on the right wing back and bring in like Sarr and Chalobah and whoever centre back. So who knows? But I mean, it's difficult to speculate. But I think 3 or 4 key players still play that game for Chelsea. So it's just depending on who those key players are. Fingers crossed for Alonso. Yeah.
I was talking to a Chelsea fan today, and he's pretty confident that Mason Mount plays both games. He's confident that he starts against Wolves and at the very least, sees minutes against Leeds, although he's confident that Mason Mount starts both games. He's integral to everything that Chelsea do going forward. I know that Kovacic has just come back from injury. He came off the bench, I think, for Chelsea, and that alleviates some of the creative pressure from Mount in midfield. And maybe Thomas Tuchel will see that as an opportunity to give Mount some rest. But yeah, I'm more confident of Mason Mount starting both games than Kai Havertz and Timo Werner. I think that Havertz and Werner will be rested for that game against Leeds. Thomas Tuchel has already kind of hinted at that. His recent comments about their energy levels and their fatigue and how sharp they are. A lot of us thought that rest was coming against Everton, and it was a pretty dismal performance really from Chelsea in that game. I think mentally they just got completely overawed by Everton, and yeah, I think we'll see some changes from Tuchel, especially up front with Havertz and Werner.
Well, we'll have to see. It's just speculation at the moment, but nevertheless, they do have fairly easy opponents. Hopefully, the players that do play twice have some good FPL point yields, because Wolves and Leeds have been struggling recently. But let's just go to the main point of this graphic is I think if you're free hitting, if you've steered your team using free hits to try and maximise this double game week, I think most people are going to have triple Liverpool, triple City, double Arsenal, double Chelsea, and one of maybe Everton, maybe a Villa, maybe a Leicester or whoever. I think that's a really good combination. And obviously, if that is the case, then you will struggle to field double game week players in game week 37. Obviously, if you're free hitting, that distinguishes that problem. But let's talk about these other teams in the top left. Leicester, this is in between their, is it UEFA Conference League final?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much they're going to rotate. I think the hypothesis is they probably will rotate very heavily. And Maddison he was completely left out at the weekend, wasn't he? Possible injury. Yeah. We are yet to know about Maddison. So definitely worth waiting in the press conference to see his fitness level, because he's probably the only player I'd touch from Leicester. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think Brendan Rodgers was saying that he's got a hip issue at the moment, and they're just trying to manage that. I think the result for Leicester is really important against Roma. If they get through to the final takes place after the Premier League season is finished. But you have to think that if Leicester do go through to the final, then Maddison's minutes will continue to be managed if he does have this hip issue, because they obviously want him to be fit for the final. So I think I would wait to see whether Leicester progress against Roma in the semi-final before making a call on Maddison. As you say, he'd probably be the only one that I would go for. Maybe Dewsbury Hall if you're on a bench boost, but there's some reports of him feeling some tightness in his hamstrings. That's not great to hear either. So yeah, there's some significant rotation risks around the Leicester players. And apart from Maddison and Dewsbury Hall, I just don't think anyone else is worth it.
Yeah, I think if I had Madison, I'd probably keep him, unless there was some concrete evidence that he was out for a while. Um, but even if he plays, uh, 30, 40 minutes in each game, I think there's a chance because of the uh, defensive stats these both teams have been conceding quite a lot. I think there's a chance that he gets quite a lot of points, even in those limited minutes. But completely depends on his fitness. Norwich, I think we can't go to Pookie really now if you haven't already, because they're relegated.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty demoralising. And even though Pookie was getting some momentum, I think steer clear unless you're on bench boost and you need some cheap strikers. I think he's absolutely fine, as is Emmanuel Dennis from Watford. He's had a little bit of form recently. Crystal Palace and Everton aren't the worst fixtures, but I'm not sure I'd be going for any other Watford player. I mean, I'm not sure on Sarr. He was excellent at the start of the season, wasn't he? But I don't even know if he's been playing. I haven't really been watching Watford, actually. But yes, I think the key players we're going to talk about this video are really Everton, Villa, and Spurs. And for different reasons, because Everton, they're on the up, they're getting results, they're fighting for their lives in the Premier League. Burnley keep winning, Everton keep winning. It's interesting. So we're going to talk about Richarlison, we're going to talk about Anthony Gordon, we're going to talk about Watkins, Ings, Ramsey, Coutinho from Villa, and even like a Matty Cash, for example, and whether to sell Spurs assets, because their double against Liverpool away and Arsenal at home is on paper very tricky, but they're in really good form and have been since the turn of the year. So what are your views about selling Tottenham, Ryan?
Yeah, I think whenever you're talking about selling a player, you have to say, well, who are you selling them for? And that answer will help determine whether it's a good decision, right, to sell the player or not. And so in the case of Spurs, we're looking at Kane, Son, Kulusevski. Who are you selling these players for? And right now, apart from the obvious being Salah, in midfield, I think the only player you could probably justify selling Son or Kane for would be Kevin De Bruyne. He had his rest against Leeds. We know that there's some slight injury concerns there, but I don't think Pep can afford to not play Kevin De Bruyne for the remainder of the season. So in midfield, I would say the only player that I could probably justify selling Son or Kane for would be De Bruyne. There's no one else up front that I would want to sell Kane for. And I don't even think it's worth downgrading one of these players to bring in a Cancelo or a Robertson in defence. I think probably the only player that I would that I would sell Son or Kane for would be De Bruyne or Salah if you don't have these guys already. But for me, I've got Son. I think the fixtures in double game week 36 really suit Son. Liverpool, we know that they play a high line. They do give up chances, and Son's pace, getting in behind. We know the tactic from Conte will be for Kane to drop deep and to launch through balls in for Son to get on the end of. So I think that's a good fixture for Tottenham. And then again, playing Arsenal. Arsenal defensively haven't been too strong recently. Tomiyasu's just coming back from injury. They've got some concerns as well in midfield. So Ben White, I think he might be out as well now. Rob Holding had to come in for that fixture. So looking at that on paper and looking at the fixtures for Tottenham in your graph, it looks like a difficult double game week for Spurs. And it is. But I think for Son and his unique capability, I think it's a good double game week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the counter-attacking side Spurs, they're going to enjoy playing against high possession teams. I think the Arsenal game is where Son can really capitalise. It really depends on how Arteta sets up. Liverpool have been really defensively strong. They've been managing to prevent counter-attacking play from most teams, and they have the best goalkeeper, arguably. It's in the Premier League. The best goalkeeper in the Premier League for stopping one-on-ones. So whether or not Son just completely counteracts that is fine. But yeah, I completely agree with you. He's got every chance of doing well in those fixtures. So we'll discuss more Spurs later on. Aston Villa, they've got this double-double. Burnley and Liverpool, this one, I think they have a better double in 37. But if you haven't got any chips, there's no reason why you can't get on a Villa asset. We'll talk about their stats, we'll talk about their points in a minute, which player to go for. And I think the Everton double is really understated. I think Leicester and Watford, on paper, Leicester may be a more tricky fixture, but the fact that they are, embroiled in focusing on Europe, I think Everton, they're fighting for their lives. They can really capitalise on that game. Leicester conceding quite a lot of goals. So I think an Everton player might be a really good shout as well. So let's move on to the first graphic, and we're going to look at points. We're going to look at explosiveness, I think that's the word, and versus reliability. And we sort of looked at this last week. I've sort of updated it to be more of a like-for-like comparison. So it's chances, it's not chances, it's how often a player has returned as a percentage in their last 10 game weeks. So players towards the right, you can see Jesus and Alexander-Arnold. Jesus, small sample size, take it with a pinch of salt, but Alexander-Arnold has returned at least once in every single game in which he started in the last 10 game weeks. So incredible reliability there. But, hang on a minute. I've just got a pop-up from Zoom saying, running out of time, this meeting will end in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I can see that too.
I think Zoom's updated recently to kick you out, actually. That is really annoying. I might have to, start a new one or change to a different one. So, yeah, sorry, guys. We'll do... I'm going to go for another sort of 5-10 minutes, and then I'll try and sort that out. It might be a little bit of a gap in the stream. I think Zoom's updated. Normally, we could have done this as per normal. So bear with us in about 5 minutes. I'll sort that out. But yeah, just to continue the description of the graph, towards the top, we've got the percentage of times that they've actually had a double-digit haul in the last 10 game weeks. So the players towards the top are more explosive. They've had much higher chance. They've had much higher. They've proven that they've have a much higher percentage of scoring multiple returns. And Son and Kane are up there. 16 returns in 12 starts for Kane, 14 returns in 12 starts for Son. And Salah, he's up there, but he's not quite as good as those Spurs guys. So it's going to be difficult to sell those ahead of this double game week, Ryan, really difficult. Robertson there, 12 returns in 9 starts, consistent, very, very consistent. And Kulusevski, equally as consistent for his price. So plenty of players to discuss there. What I might do, guys, is before starting this, I'm going to just quickly end the Zoom and switch over to another account, which I know is professional, and then we can keep going from there. So just bear with us for a couple of minutes. So Ryan, I'm going to kick you out, and then I'm going to send you a Zoom link, and if you could just join that as quickly as possible, that'd be really good.
Yep. Sounds good.
1 second, don't leave. Notepad. Okay, I'll send you the new link in a minute. Sorry, guys, bear with me. I'm still streaming, so I just need to switch over to another account.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
Right, it won't be 2 minutes, chaps. I'm sorry about this. Really, really annoying. Really annoying. I wonder if anyone knows in the chat about whether Zoom's updated their free service. I think they've seems to be they've got rid of it. So that's super annoying. Zoom to Teams -4. I hate Teams. Teams is awful. It just seems like the video quality is just not quite there.
We're in.
Are you there? Are you there?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. It seems like we might be back. Woohoo. Sorry about that, chaps. My favourite comment of the season. Zoom to Teams for a hit. Love that.
Some good comments in the chat. I like that. Skype is the real OG.
Okay, I'm going to have to bear that in mind for future streams and have the use of the professional one. I thought I could get away with it on a basic contract, but it seems like they've changed that. Right, back to the stream. No further delay. Sorry for that. What we're talking about? We're talking about points here, Ryan. We're talking about how many points these guys have scored in the last 10 game weeks, a sufficient amount of time. And there's plenty, there's the usual culprits here. There's Liverpool. We know Liverpool are good. I'm sure if you have any three of those guys, you're going to be happy. Probably Salah, Robertson, Trent are probably the ones. But how difficult is it going to be about selling these Spurs guys for the likes of maybe De Bruyne, who's had 8 returns and 8 starts? Pretty good reliability, pretty good explosiveness. Is it a good move in your opinion?
To sell Spurs for someone like a De Bruyne? Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I mean, we look back at these returns, and a lot of it has to do with the fixtures that these teams have had. So it'd be interesting to have a look at the correlation, obviously, between FPL returns and the difficulty of the fixtures that these teams have faced. There's no doubt that City have the better fixtures than Spurs from now until the end of the season. So I think there's every chance that KDB, with better fixtures, outscores Son and Kane with more difficult fixtures. I think there's a chance of that happening. And with only 3 game weeks left until the end of the season, variance is going to be more volatile than in the middle of the season, for example. You can get away with not having Trent and with not having Salah across 3 game weeks, but you can't get away with that across the whole season. So Son and Kane, they are great assets, but can you get away with not having them in 3 game weeks for Kevin De Bruyne with better fixtures? I think you can. There's a risk, but I definitely think that you can get away with not having Son or Kane and selling them to go for a De Bruyne.
It's really annoying, isn't it? Because Spurs have Burnley and Norwich in 37 and 38. So it makes it additionally difficult to sell these guys, like 2 ideal fixtures. If you've got a free hit in 37, you can get Kane and Son back in and then potentially even move De Bruyne to Son in game week 38. This is potentially what I'm considering. I'm considering moving Kane to De Bruyne. That's 2 moves for a hit this week. I think City's fixtures are just really, really good. The momentum, the necessity they have to win every single game until the end of the season is just so paramount. And I think De Bruyne is that key attacking asset for City. I know he got rested, and that's probably an additional reason to get him. Nice rest ahead of the Champions League game. Obviously, we need to wait until, I think they're playing on Tuesday. They're playing tomorrow, I think. Just wait until after that game to see what happens, see what the state of play is. But I do like, just for game week 36, like a Kane to De Bruyne. I think Son to De Bruyne is more of a difficult move because he's just been in such amazing form. So really, really difficult one. And like, even though you look at Son and Kane up there, 14 returns in 12 for Son, 16 returns in 12 for Kane, but there's a massive disparity in the type of returns. Son's got like 8 goals and Kane's got like 7 or 8 assists. But because midfielders score 2 more points for a goal versus an assist, and then the bonus points on top of that, it's just compounded to be such a major disparity between the two.
Yeah, it definitely is. We were talking before the stream about the points that Son and Kane have accrued in the last 6 game weeks. So in the last 6 game weeks, Kane has scored 37 FPL points and Son has scored 73. And the returns are very similar. But as you say, it's the different type of return. Son is getting more goals, Kane is getting more assists. And then Son is, of course, getting the clean sheet points and the extra points for his goal. So yeah, I think that's probably something that we don't see in this graphic, is that whilst the return number might be similar, it's the size of that return which we kind of need to dig into a little bit more. I think I was looking at your team before we jumped into the stream, and you're someone who doesn't have Son, and I think that your team kind of encapsulates the managers who don't have Son versus the managers who do, like me. It is very difficult, if not impossible, for me to have Salah, Son, and De Bruyne in my team. I would have to break my team to try and guard against De Bruyne and bring him in whilst holding on to Son and Salah. But for you, your money and your budget and your team is structured in such a way that you can get to a De Bruyne more easily and you can have Salah and De Bruyne. And I think you say, this is my De Bruyne sword and I'm coming up against your Son sword, and let's just see who the winner is, because no team will have both. Yeah. And so that's going to be the battle. It's the Son versus De Bruyne, because you can't have both and Salah in your team, and everyone's going to have Salah.
So the fact that Kane is slightly more expensive actually works in my favour, because it's a cash cow down to De Bruyne, who's, I think, 0.6 cheaper, something like that. So, but then again, I'm spending like 2 million more on Kane versus Son or whoever, who's arguably a better player. So it's a silver lining in my, misery of not owning Son. But yeah, I completely get it. And I think De Bruyne owners this week will be very tempted to captain him. Whereas I think the likes of people who keep hold of Son are going to captain Salah this week. So it's going to be a massive battle between Salah captainers and De Bruyne captainers, even though De Bruyne probably won't be that highly owned. And I think if you're looking to climb the rankings, De Bruyne captain this week is probably, a really good upside move. And I'm going to fear going up against a really high EO Salah captain. So I don't know. I think I probably will captain De Bruyne because of the fixtures. I think Liverpool's fixtures, Spurs and Villa. Salah's form recently has dipped a little bit. I'm quite happy about De Bruyne just as a non-upside move, like just as a choice. Like I think he'll get more points than Salah. So it's a really difficult one. But I think if you're going to do the move from Kane to De Bruyne, I think it's worth it, even if you don't captain him, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a good conversation, but let's have a talk about these other guys, because especially the Villa players, because I think they're going to be very topical coming up. They got a 2-0 win this weekend, which is obviously great, and they got that clean sheet. I think they've got 2 clean sheets in a row now. So for anyone investing in like Matty Cash, for example, you're sort of excited at the moment, because especially game week 37, where your fixtures are slightly easier, you could expect those clean sheet points in 37. I think Villa could be one to invest in, and the guy that I was most impressed by was Danny Ings. The problem is he's had very limited minutes over this time period. Now, could we see more starts and more returns from Danny Ings over the next couple of game weeks?
It's a good question. I mean, if we knew the answer, if Danny Ings was nailed on to start every game, I think he'd be in a lot more teams. As it is, his fitness concerns, and I think what we've seen from him recently, we just can't trust that Danny Ings will start back-to-back games. And that's why people have gone for Watkins. I don't think that if we're comparing finishing ability, Watkins is a better finisher than Danny Ings. It's just that we can trust the reliability of starts from Watkins. And if you're buying a player for a double game week and they only play one, then most of the reason why you brought them into your team is completely redundant. So with Danny Ings, I think he's a great asset. But look, they've got Burnley, Liverpool, and then Crystal Palace and Burnley in their double-double. And then they've got City in game week 38. So he's probably not someone that I would want to bring in for a free transfer. But if you're on a free hit in 37, yeah, definitely someone that you might want to look at them.
So I'm just looking at his timeline here. And when he was fit back in maybe game week 26, from game week 26, he started 5 games in a row up until game week 29. And he got 4 attacking returns in that period. Very decent. Since then, I think he's been struggling with a little bit of an injury issue. He played 8 minutes against Arsenal, 0 minutes against Wolves. He started against Spurs and then didn't play against Leicester and then started against Norwich. So he's only had 2 starts in his last 5 games. But what we know about Ings is he's more of an explosive player. And that sort of that demonstrates on the chart. Because when you compare him to Watkins, his position, you can see that he's got a propensity for a double-digit haul, much higher chance of that than Watkins, who's been just sort of, when he returns, it's literally just 1 return in a game. Zero double-digit hauls in the last 10 game weeks. He's got 4 returns in 9. Very, very steady Eddie. So he's an unexciting pick, but it's a double game week. If you want reliability, go Watkins. If you want the chance that Ings starts a run of games like he did from game week 26, a more explosive player, then go Ings. Otherwise, you're gambling that Coutinho gets a bit of a resurgence. He's been pretty rubbish recently, Brian. What's happened to Coutinho?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some respects the returns haven't been there, but he was fairly creative in that game against Norwich. I think he supplied 4 key passes, so his chance creation was quite high. It's the most of any player in the game. Just the returns haven't been there, and the fixtures have been quite difficult for Villa. We know that Coutinho is a little bit of a flat track bully, so I'm not expecting Coutinho to do too well in double game week 36. They've got Burnley, which is nice, but that fixture against Liverpool, I just don't see Coutinho doing too well in that game. 37, Crystal Palace and Burnley, I think they suit Coutinho a little bit more. Definitely didn't live up to the hype ahead of the Norwich fixture, and I think a lot of managers were banking on him returning in that game. But, his chance creation was high. I think his expected goals was pretty high as well. I think he had 0.3 in that game. So he's still, taking some decent shots. I think just the points haven't returned for Coutinho just yet. But just going to make a quick comment on Villa and Danny Ings there before we move off Danny Ings. And we know that Gerrard has kind of played a 4-3-2-1 / a 4-3-1-2. Occasionally he's played with Danny Ings and Watkins up front. But recently he's moved to a single striker formation with Watkins there. But there was the injury to Leon Bailey early in that game. I'm not sure Gerrard trusts Buendia and Coutinho starting together as 2 kind of number 10s, if you like. So we might see Gerrard revert to the 4-3-1-2 with Coutinho in behind Danny Ings and Watkins. And I think if we see Gerrard do that with his formation against Burnley, I would definitely be on board bringing Danny Ings in for the free hit in 37, because I think if they go for the 4-3-1-2 and we see Ings and Watkins up front, if they're both playing 90 minutes, I prefer Ings to Watkins.
So if I had to push you and you had to make that move this week rather than waiting one, what would you gamble on?
Oh, good question. So I have to bring in either Watkins or Ings to my team. Depends on whether you want to chase or whether you want to protect. I'm probably more of a chaser than a protector. I would go for Danny Ings. I don't like Watkins as an asset.
I just look at the massive disparity between Ings' explosiveness and Watkins, but also look at the reliability versus for Watkins versus Ings. I think the gap between the explosiveness is much greater than Watkins versus Ings. Well, I'd say much greater. I mean, it's probably about the same because the scales are slightly different. But I mean, I'd rather have someone who is more explosive and who has more of a better return rate. 6 returns in 6 starts. That's 1 return per start. Watkins is less than half than that. So really difficult one. I'm quite happy that I have to wait a game week in order to decide. But if it depends if you're upside chasing, of course. But I like the dilemma. I think Ramsey is an interesting one as well. 1 return in 10. He's sort of fallen off the the apple cart a little bit, but for his price, he could be an enabler, and he seems to be starting every game, so absolutely fine. So an interesting one there. I'm not sure we reached a complete conclusion. I think probably it was go Watkins if you just want reliability, go Ings if you want some upside, but that might completely change ahead of game week 37. I've just got a super chat here from Nick. Guys, please don't send any more super chats because otherwise this will basically turn into a Q&A. But I'm going to answer this from Nick, just because you didn't really know that. But he asked, which Chelsea to City move would you make this week? James to Laporte, Havertz to Foden, or Werner to Jesus? Really difficult one, and I guess that really emphasises the move from Chelsea to City this week. We like Chelsea. We like City's double. I think Laporte is, a solid move. I think James probably does get rotated, and you're probably going to get an extra fixture from Laporte. Havertz to Foden, less sure about that one, because Foden could equally get rotated in one of those games. Likewise, Havertz. So not as clear cut. Do you like the Jesus move, Werner to Jesus?
No, not really. I mean, Jesus recently has been quite explosive, and we can see there at least a return in his last 10 game weeks. So he's had 7 returns from 3 starts. So incredible form from Jesus recently. I don't like Werner to Jesus really, because I just don't think we can rely on him for starts. I probably prefer the Havertz to Foden move, but I'd almost be tempted to go Werner down to a double game week striker, even someone like a Richarlison or a Danny Ings or a Watkins or a Pookie, even lower if you wanted to go for an Nketiah and then do Havertz to KDB. You might already have KDB, but I'd probably be tempted to take more cash out of my front line and then make my midfield stronger.
Yeah, even for a hit. I don't mind that at all, actually.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers your question, Nick. But yeah, just to reiterate, no more super chats, please. We won't answer them. Sorry. Even though the money does go to Street Child United, I think the other guys have been plugging that in their streams. But yeah, back to it. And I think I wanted to discuss Everton here because Richarlison has been really good recently. 5 returns in his last 11 starts. But I think those 5 returns have come fairly recently in the latter part of this 10 game week period. So he's in a bit of form, Ryan. Do you own Richarlison and do you kind of want him?
Well, I want to see what happens with the flare gate first and to see whether there's any suspension. I can't speculate on what will happen there, but of course, if he faces a suspension, then he falls off the radar completely. He's Everton's talisman. He's on penalties now. He's got that definitely above Calvert-Lewin. He's leading the line for Everton. And I think even if Calvert-Lewin comes back, I don't see Richarlison's FPL appeal diminishing. I'm really tempted by Richarlison. I favour him more than Watkins. Your graph has Richarlison over Watkins here. He's got 5 returns in 11 starts. A little bit more explosive, I think, as well than Watkins. That's why he's a little bit higher. His double-digit haul percentage is a little bit higher than Watkins. So, yeah, it's definitely tempted by Richarlison. And as we saw from the team graph that you had earlier, Everton's fixtures in double game week 36 are actually pretty decent. They're playing a Leicester team who are distracted by Europe, and then they're playing a Watford team who hate playing at home. So I think it's a good double game week for Everton.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to move on to the next chart because all of these are the same sort of players. But this is momentum, so this is how much their stats and returns have changed in the last 4 game weeks to the prior 4 game weeks. So just to the top right is players that have actually increased their XGI per 90, this non-penalty, and increased their non-penalty attacking returns in the last 4 compared to the prior 4. So it's like they're getting better recently, and I kind of want to capitalise on that trend. You can see Werner, Richarlison. Richarlison's definitely the one that intuitively you could come up and say, yes, he's got a bit of form. Yes, he's improving. But likewise, Pookie, Watkins, Anthony Gordon are also there. I'm not sure we go Diaz unless you want to really, really punt because he's not completely sure of minutes. But it's interesting to see that Richarlison and Watkins are in that top right quadrant. Their stats have improved and their returns have improved. Does that bode well going forward? I think it does. And it kind of makes me want Richarlison that bit more. So
yeah, completely. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand. You might go on to explain the color coding as well for Richarlison above and below his name. Does that mean his fixtures recently have been more difficult than they were 5 to 8 game weeks ago?
yeah, absolutely. So it's even more of an impressive feat
Mm,
to actually do better. I mean, they've played Liverpool, they've played Chelsea in the last four. Overall, those four fixtures have been harder than they were 5 to 8 game weeks ago. So the fact that he's improved his attacking stats and he's
mm,
improved his actual returns is a great feat. And Gordon is kind of the same. So they really are fighting for their lives. They're really, really going for it. And I think I want a piece of that action. So I think Richarlison comes in this game week for me. But yeah, Watkins is kind of the same to a lesser extent. And Watkins last week on this chart was bottom right. So his stats have improved. And then, of course, he got his goal at the weekend. So I don't know whether that's just a coincidence, the fact that the stats have improved, therefore he's actually got a return. I wonder whether that continues into the double-double.
yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, the fixture for Villa against Liverpool, I don't see them getting much out of that from an attacking point of view. If you don't have any Villa now, I think you wait until 37 and you get them on a free hit, or maybe you dabble with a Coutinho or a Watkins or Ings for that double game week. I don't know if I'd be buying anyone ahead of this double.
Yeah, interesting one. Yeah, so there's actually an interesting talking point about Richarlison, that he's got 9 yellow cards.
Yeah, I'm
But
seeing that in the chat.
yeah, people are saying in the chat, but the 10 card limit for suspension has actually moved. I think it was in game week 32 that might have happened actually. So he won't get suspended if he gets more yellow cards. He might, however, get suspended because of the flare thing. So the moral of the story is basically wait until the end of the game week to bring in Richarlison. We will know whether he's been cleared from that or not. Also, there's an additional slight concern about whether he's injured, but that was cleared up. I think Neil wrote in Fantasy Football Scout article this morning, it was just cramp. Lampard confirmed that it was just cramp. So fingers crossed, it was just a minor little fatigue that he was suffering at the end of that game. But he's definitely on my radar. I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, he's a potential captain option even in game week 37. I agree with what's being said, especially from FPL Spartans in the chat. Richarlison feels like he's one brain snap away from a red card in any game. And he's the type of, you flick the TV on and you see a little red square above Everton's name. And the first thought is, what has Richarlison done? So there's that kind of downside. I think he is quite a fiery character. We saw that a little bit in the game against Chelsea. But yeah, look, for me, Richarlison, a genuine captain option in game week 37. We know that Everton at home have been in remarkable form recently. They beat Manchester United and Chelsea at home recently. And I think they've got 2 fixtures at home in 37. I might be wrong there, but I think they've got a couple of nice home fixtures to finish the season. So yeah, Richarlison, a great option. I think whether you're on a free hit or whether you have no chips left, I like Richarlison more than a Watkins, for example.
So I want to just touch on Danny Ings here, because clearly he's improved his attacking stats. This is per 90. So he's only had like 50, 60 minutes in the 2 starts he's actually had in the last 5 game weeks. So on a per 90 basis, that basically enhances his numbers a little bit. But nevertheless, those numbers have definitely improved. He's getting loads of chances, and he converted a couple at the weekend. Well, I think one of them was an assist. But it just adds to the interest for me, and I'm glad I'm waiting one more week. But it's interesting there. And Maddison there, obviously he didn't play at the weekend, so this hasn't changed since the last graphic. But stats have improved. It's a little bit underwhelming on the attacking returns, but the numbers are there. I think if he plays any sorts of minute in this double game week, he can get something. I think I can't remember what game it was, but I think it was 2 game weeks ago, and he had all the chances in that game, but they just couldn't. I think it was a Villa game actually. He just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, but he had so many good attacking stats numbers that the signs are there. The signs are there.
Yeah, completely. And we we often say in a double game week, you want to bring in players who are playing both games or the players with the highest level of expected minutes, because it's a double game week. You want them just for their appearance points. They're likely to get at least 4 points. So if they're playing a double game week, bring in the players who are going to be playing the most minutes. But looking at Maddison, he is such an explosive asset, and Leicester's double game week is against Everton and Norwich. I think both are at home. Now, if he doesn't play the Everton game, which comes very quickly after the Europa Conference League game for Leicester, let's say he doesn't play the Everton game, that's a single game week fixture against Norwich, a relegated Norwich at home. I would be happy to have Maddison for a single game week fixture against Norwich at home, knowing that he's got a double game week in 37 to come after, which will be uninterrupted by Europe, whether Leicester progress or whether they're knocked out. So last week, ahead of Villa versus Norwich, all the talk was Coutinho. He's got Norwich, and then he's got back-to-back doubles. This week, you could even argue that Maddison has got a single game week against Norwich, and then he's got a double in game week 37. Now, I think that's a pretty strong case to bring Maddison in.
I think anyone that's holding him definitely shouldn't sell. I'm not 100% sure whether it's a stretch too far to bring him in, but I completely agree with you. Even if you treated it just as a single game week, I think he's got an absolutely fantastic chance. But even if those minutes are divided between the two fixtures, I think it's equally as fine. So yeah, an interesting one for sure. So I just wanted to, a couple of questions in the chat asking like, where are these other players? There are some players on here that are just so, the change has been so massive that they can't actually fit on this chart. So Jesus is one of them. His change is actually near, for attacking returns, is like up to 2, but his XGI changes on like a -1. So he's at really, really top left. It's kind of a real big extreme, but the problem is, it's kind of a small sample size. He's only really played 2 or 3 games. So it's one to ignore. Other players that have dropped off massively with their attacking returns per game is Cristiano Ronaldo. Plenty of hat-tricks scored. Recently that's died down. Reece James has really, really died off as well, because obviously I think he got that goal and assist in game week 28, I think it was, and then since then not done nothing. Raheem Sterling is another one with attacking returns. So those 4 players have really fallen off. So yes, like any other players to talk about, Harry Kane here has really fallen off in both, and that kind of enables me a little bit with my mind to go Kane to De Bruyne. I think it makes it easier. And the same with, well, I want to say the same. I'm keeping Havertz, but that does not bode well for Havertz. I'm a little bit upset.
Yeah. I think for those guys in that bottom kind of quarter, if you like, or bottom section, Kane, Havertz, Coutinho, it's not great signs for them. I brought Coutinho into my team last game week with the intention of holding him through 36 and 37, but the midfield spots are so coveted right now. It feels like carrying a Havertz or even carrying a Coutinho or a Rafinha or Kulusevski, it feels suboptimal when you could replace them with, someone else in midfield, that a De Bruyne or a Foden, for example, these players that we don't yet have. So yeah, I think it's a big call for managers with the likes of Kane, Havertz, Coutinho, Rafinha, Kulusevski. Do you hold these players, or do you move to the other midfielders that we've discussed, even a Maddison?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I was just looking at the Spurs guys, Son and Kulusevski at the top there. It's going, well, Son, Kulusevski and Kane, they've all reduced their non-penalty XGI. And then maybe that's just a representation of the difficult sort of games that they've had recently. They've struggled in 2 innocuous games as well. But it seems like Kulusevski and Son, their attacking returns have not decreased as much as Kane. And I think that's because Son has scored a couple of wonder goals. Kulusevski tends to assist those, so maybe they're just sort of dovetailing a little bit. I wonder whether that's some indication about regression, but maybe not. Maybe it's just the fact that they were underperforming in the previous 4 game weeks. So who knows? But let's move on from this chart, because I want to have a look at these stats themselves, because I think, the change in stats, the change in returns can be a little bit misleading. We've got Kane top right here, and we just saw Kane in the bottom left on the previous chart, which shows that he's got worse at stuff. So his stats must have been insane in that 5 to 8 game week period, 8 game weeks ago, for him to actually reduce and still be really good on this chart. So it's just a different perspective here. Kane is still really good. And Son equally so. We've got Jesus above those, small sample size, take it with a pinch of salt. The thing that interests me here is that Salah has kind of shrunk recently. He's got further towards the left-hand side, slowly but surely, and it kind of makes me a little bit more worried about captaining him this week.
Yeah, I think though with Salah, I mean, looking at his minutes per expected goal involvement across the last 6 game weeks, I think Salah's still like 4th or 5th best in the league, whereas Kane's dropped right out of the top 10. So the drop from Kane to Salah, I think when we're looking at their stats, for me, Salah's still performing. His underlying statistics are still right up there. I don't think he's been delivering on those statistics as we've seen him do earlier in the season. But for me, Salah right now has the better statistics in terms of expected goal involvement than Kane. And I trust Salah and his conversion. And I think that over a period of time, Salah is a player that will fulfill those statistics, if you like. So, yeah, looking at Salah's regression, if you like, I'm not too concerned. He's in my team. There's no way that I'm contemplating transferring him out. I know that some managers have gone without Salah. I think that if you've done that, you've made your bed, you go elsewhere. I don't think you come back to Salah now. I think you go for De Bruyne or you go for a Son and you take it on. But I think if you've got Salah, there's no need to panic and transfer him out. And I still think he's the best captain option this game week. I think it's not a one-horse race, though. I think there's a few other options. I think De Bruyne, I even think Cancelo come into the equation. But Salah, for me, is still the best captain option in game week 36. He's had his rest now as well. I think that adds to the appeal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nothing to be too worried about. And equally so, you could look at De Bruyne here and say, he doesn't really do big attempts. He doesn't do big chances. I'm surprised he hasn't got so many big chances created, which is also included in the big attempts. But equally so involved, like arguably the most involved player in any game, so many small attempts, and look at the number of small returns he gets. 1 small return per appearance. It doesn't matter how you get them. He's an incredibly technically able player and can convert anything, and he's been proving that. I think from the points graph, it was 8 returns in 8 starts, so that just shows very, very consistent, and arguably, probably the best captain this week, potentially. If you've still got that triple captainship left over, do you plump on Salah or De Bruyne?
Yeah, well, earlier when we're looking at your team stats graph, I think it showed that City had, on paper, the better double game week. City have Newcastle at home and then Wolves away. Liverpool have Tottenham at home and Villa away. I do like City's double more than Liverpool, so I think there's definitely a shout there to captain De Bruyne over Salah. I think you understand the risk in terms of the effective ownership, but I don't think captaining De Bruyne is a bad option this game week.
No, I completely agree, and I'm very tempted to do it myself, to be completely honest. You can see there, Richarlison, really, really good stats, and he was like bottom left a few game weeks ago, so in the difficult fixtures, he's actually increased his stats. We saw that on the momentum graph a minute ago. Again, just a further enhancing his appeal. Don't want to talk about Richarlison again because we've sort of done it to death. But yeah, wait until we see what the ban, whether that flare thing sparks up any sort of...
Oh, nice pun.
Oh,
That's
God,
good.
yeah, terrible. I didn't even know I was making it. But yeah, okay, anyone else to talk about on this? Like Anthony Gordon, Jacob Ramsey down there, bottom left, limited appeal, but for their price, they can still get something. Ramsey with no returns in his last 6 game weeks. This is on the last 6 game weeks, by the way. Anthony Gordon has got a return, 0.3 smaller terms per appearance, and that's what you're basically limited to with Anthony Gordon. He likes a shot from outside the box, but they have sort of been getting closer and closer recently. So, he could score like a wonder goal in this double game week, and owners will be very happy. But don't expect too much. I think that's the message.
Yeah, I think for bench boosters, Anthony Gordon is the way to go. And bench boosters are quite fortunate in the sense that you've got Dewsbury Hall, you've got Gordon, you've got Jacob Ramsey, these budget midfielders who have the double game week. And, you've even got Nketiah as well. So I think initially we thought that there would be a dearth of budget options to include in your bench boost, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think there's quite a few options. I think Gordon is probably the best of that sub 5 million midfield bracket. Just looking at some of the other options here in midfield, those owners who had Sterling for the last 2 game weeks, City score 9 goals and Sterling doesn't get a single attacking return. That's got to be frustrating. There's Jesus there and Mahrez as well from City's midfield. The problem with those guys is, of course, expected minutes. So De Bruyne, I think we're saying is the best asset from City in midfield. But if you want to double up on their attack, who would you partner De Bruyne with? How do you rank their midfield options?
Yeah, I haven't got Phil Foden on here, and I think he just didn't pop up in the top 30 players, and that kind of says it all really about Foden. Is the returns he's been getting recently, they've been a little bit understated. His stats aren't actually that good, but arguably he's the most secure for minutes at the moment, it seems. Really high recovery rate. And this is what we were talking about last week, right? We're talking about just pick the players who are just going to start more often than not, and he's probably going to get involved now and then. So I've got Foden at the moment. I'm kind of I wasn't happy recently, but nearly 2 double figure hauls. I think he got a 10 2 game weeks ago and a 9 this week. Really, really happy with that. But I kind of feel a little bit fortunate. He hasn't really done anything to prove that statistics wise. But again, the philosophy that as long as you own some City players and they play more often than not, they're going to get points. So I think Foden is probably the one because he's the cheapest and he's going to start more often than not. Otherwise, you're gambling on the likes of Mahrez and Sterling, even Jesus, like continuing to keep their places ahead of the likes of Grealish and whoever, Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, who might come in, and likewise each for each other as well. So I think De Bruyne and Foden are probably the best and most secure double up in midfield. Otherwise, I think going heavy on defence is a really good and shrewd move because they're arguably the best for keeping clean sheets.
Yeah, I actually really don't mind Bernardo Silva as well. I can see that Dread FPL in the chat has mentioned Bernardo Silva. Pep Guardiola uses Bernardo to press quite high. Like he's very energetic, Bernardo Silva, and he got that goal a couple of game weeks ago. I can't remember who City were playing, but they turned the ball over I think it might have even been Brighton. City pressed high, Brighton turned the ball over, De Bruyne got a toe to the ball, and Bernardo Silva's there on the edge of the 18-yard box because he's pushed up high to initiate the press. And I think that Bernardo Silva, in terms of expected minutes, is right up there for City. And looking at the fixtures that they've got ahead, I think Bernardo Silva could be an outside chance if you want an alternative option in midfield. I've contemplated I don't have the funds to get a De Bruyne into my team, so I've even contemplated going triple City defence, which could be an option for managers as well. So I can see Cancelo there, for example. I mean, he's nailed on, especially with the injuries City have at the back.
I'm kind of a bit smug about Cancelo because we went a few game weeks ago.
Yeah, we did.
Stating, Laporte probably is a decent compromise, and Cancelo hasn't really done anything to prove that he's a better FPL asset than Laporte because he's been struggling with conversion. I really, really hate that I'm saying this now because he's definitely going to punish me this double game week. Like I'm going without him, and he's like the highest effective ownership player in that City team. That I'm just gonna get punished. I know it. He's gonna have his 20-point haul. But anyway, I think triple City defense is not a bad option at all. I kind of like it, but I think Foden and De Bruyne for me are the ones that I'm going to enjoy owning.
For sure.
But yes, I'm not sure there's much to talk about. I mean, Maddison there, we've talked about Maddison already. Mason Mount, similar players to De Bruyne, kind of really involved a lot. Probably going to play more often, more minutes. So similar with Chelsea. I think Chelsea players are probably going to be fine if you pick the players who are going to play more often than not. They're just a little bit more in doubt, as we were discussing at the start of the video. The Liverpool defenders, Trent and Robbo, always look a bit worse on this chart because you're comparing them against midfielders and forwards, but we know that their attacking capability is always consistently very, very strong. I recently brought in Robertson to go alongside Trent this week. I wish they could just play, at the same time. That would be really nice.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, at least you got a Liverpool clean sheet. What's your read on the Robertson rotation? I was having a chat with a few people on Twitter today. What are your thoughts on Robertson's potential rotation?
So my thoughts, my hopes, I'd start with my hopes. My hopes are that he gets rested midweek in the Champions League, because with a 2-0 lead, I should say, there's a chance that Tsimikas comes in and he could be equally as effective as Robertson, really. I do rate Tsimikas, and we know that Villarreal don't really score that many goals. So, I mean, I think it would be fine to do that. And then, we go into the double game week with Robertson having a rest, and then he can start again. If he starts the Champions League, there is a chance that he does get rested in one of these games, and that kind of does worry me a little bit. Is it Tottenham first for Liverpool, or do they play second?
Yeah, Tottenham first, and then they play Villa.
So that's interesting, because the order makes me think that that's too big a game to play Tsimikas in.
Yeah.
So I would bet that Robertson gets rested in the Champions League and maybe comes on for like 20, 30 minutes if they really need to change it. Otherwise, maybe just Robertson's just such a machine that you can just play all these games and be absolutely fine.
Yeah, but I think Klopp's comments, right, suggested that Robertson was in line for a rest this game week, but with the rest for Trent and Tsimikas, I think he was ill in the week leading up to the match against Newcastle, so I think he was a bit reluctant to play Tsimikas and to rotate Trent and Robbo and a centre-back as well. So I think that Klopp intends to rest Robertson at some point in the next few game weeks. I agree with you. I think it's coming in the Champions League, and then he'll play the rest of the Premier League fixtures. I don't have Robertson, so part of me hopes that he plays the Champions League, plays the 90 minutes, and then he's rested for one of the double game week fixtures. What are the other options in terms of the Liverpool defence? We've got obviously Van Dijk and Matip. They're probably the main two. Do you think Matip's a chance of being rested for Konate at all in the Premier League?
I'm not so sure about that. I think there's been a clear separation between when Klopp utilises Konate. It seems to be only in the Cup and in the Champions League. There must be a reason for that. I don't think he just starts messing it all up. I think Matip plays all the Premier League games, and if you were considering other options from Liverpool, I think Matip is probably the one, because he offers slightly more than Van Dijk from a set piece perspective, funnily enough, from the stats. And he's, otherwise you're going to get clean sheet points, and there's no difference between Van Dijk and Matip. The massive cost saving, I think Matip's now 5.1, something like that.
5.2, I think.
5.2, and Van Dijk, it's like 6.8 or something like that. So a huge saving. I think it's a no-brainer to go Matip if you are hunting in the bargain basement aisle. So yeah, I think that's a sensible move. I just really hope that Robertson gets rested Champions League. Absolutely
we'll
brutal from you saying that you wanted to play. I think we are done on the stats. So let's finish the video by having a look at our bus teams and having a look at what transfers we're planning ahead of double game week 36. We'll start with you, Ryan. We've got your team up here, and we've got the same formation this week. Probably the same formation as most FPL players, to be completely honest. 4-5-1, and for the benefit of the podcast viewers, I'm just going to read out Ryan's team. We've got Ramsdale. These are all double game week players. We've got Ramsdale in goal, Alexander-Arnold, James, Cancelo, and Laporte is your theoretical transfer in. You haven't actually made that move yet. Salah captain, Mount, Saka, Son, Coutinho, and then another transfer in, a theoretical transfer, haven't made the move yet, and Ketia for his double game week. And I'll talk us through it.
Yeah, so you're right to point out that Laporte and Nketiah are my theoretical transfers. That would be for Connor Cody and for Weghorst. I know that Weghorst doubles in game week 37, but I'm just not confident of holding Weghorst through those fixtures. And I'd probably rather play some of my single game week assets than Weghorst next week. So I'm okay to lose Weghorst. Looking at my team, I'm happy with most of the players here. I accept that Reece James is probably only going to play the one game, but I don't mind having Reece James at home against Wolves. I think that's a great fixture for Chelsea. Defensively, they conceded from a great goal against Ronaldo. They made him, Azpilicueta made a mistake against Everton, but apart from that, they were quids on, whatever the saying is, quids in for a clean sheet. Someone told me that saying the other day. I've never heard it before, but I just wanted to use it. So Chelsea were likely to have a clean sheet against Everton as well, apart from that mistake from Azpilicueta. So I think that James is likely to get at least a clean sheet against Wolves, if not an attacking return. I just don't think it's worth a -4 to transfer him out. So he'll stay in the team. I've got Mason Mount as well. Again, I think I'll be lucky if I get 2 starts out of him. Happy to have at least one, if that's the case. Looking at the rest of my team, the shortcomings really is the lack of triple City and triple Liverpool. I would like to have triple City and triple Liverpool for the double game week. And I'm okay with taking even up to a -12 to make that happen. I think this is going to be a massive double game week. And if I was to get in a Robertson, who, if he got his rest in the Champions League, for example, I don't mind taking a -4 to bring in a Robertson, for example, or even in midfield, a Foden for a -4. I just think that, this is a -4 at the moment. I think a -12 would be quite extreme. I'm not likely to do that, but I guess the reason I bring that up is to emphasize how serious I think you need to be around having Liverpool and City. They both double the 2 best teams in the league. And I think if I was to go into this game week with just double Liverpool and double City, I think I would be found short. So, yeah, that's why I'm looking at Laporte and potentially Robertson, but I just don't have the funds to bring in like a De Bruyne.
Yeah, I mean, initially when you said -12, I was like, oh my God, that's terrifying. But at the same time, I'm thinking that this game is the biggest double game week of the season. It's, it could be a 200-point game week, and we've seen those in previous seasons. So a -12, if that happens, and, the likes of Robertson get a 15-pointer or even higher than that, it kind of does... Because it's the potential, the ceiling is so high for this double game week. I think a -12 gets negated to a certain extent, making sure that you've got the right players. Otherwise, if you kind of neglect it and make sure you just go through this double game week with not the ideal structure, I think the variance between the two teams could be massive, and therefore I think maybe hits could be a little bit more justified this week.
Yeah, completely. And it's for the players that you're bringing in. We spoke last week about these explosive players, and Robertson recently, we've seen that he is quite explosive. Last double game week, he only registered 2 clean sheets and I think 1 assist, and he got 18 points.
Yeah.
So these attacking defenders like Trent and Robbo, Cancelo, James, they can score big in double game weeks just through clean sheets, a couple of bonus, and maybe just 1 assist. And when we look at their minutes per expected goal involvement, it's not unrealistic to expect an attacking return from these defenders across 2 full matches. So, yeah, -12 sounds huge. I reiterate, it's not what I'm likely to do, but I say that to emphasize how serious I think we need to be about having triple Liverpool and triple City. And if it takes me a -8 or a -12 to get Robbo, to get Foden, for example, then I would be okay with that.
I'm just going to rub my hands in glee that I'm getting an immediate green arrow from...
Yeah.
No, in all seriousness, I think it's a really good point. Well made. I think triple Liverpool, triple City in the biggest double game week of the season is kind of, I don't know what to use the word, essential, but is a really good start. And yeah, good luck to anyone that's making those moves. I think, the fact that you can't get De Bruyne is not the end of the world. You've got Son. We've talked about his potential against difficult opposition. You never know. He could get 20 points this week. And, you're absolutely laughing because, I think maybe people move out Spurs assets this week. I want to talk about the Arsenal guys because I've got Ramsdale in goal as well. But recently, apparently the stats have been saying that he's been underperforming in terms of preventing XG and preventing goals. Like he should have kept more goals out. And I wonder whether he's just having a bit of a lack of form, lack of confidence, and the realistic chances of Arsenal's clean sheets potential against Leeds and Spurs. Like I think Leeds is probably the one that they could keep a clean sheet in, right?
Yeah, I think that's the fixture. I don't see them keeping a clean sheet against Spurs. Potential save points in that game for Ramsdale. I just don't think, is Ramsdale the best goalkeeper to have this game week? No. But is Ramsdale to another goalkeeper worth a -4? I don't think so.
Yeah. It's like Ramsdale's still so cheap. Like when we've bought him much earlier in the season, I think his selling price for me is like 4.8, 4.9. So really, really cheap compared to Edison or Mendy. I don't mind Edouard Mendy from Chelsea, to be completely honest, because excluding the fact that Chelsea, it might seem that they're on the beach at the moment, but they've been struggling for results and their clean sheet potential has sort of evaporated recently. They can't even keep a clean sheet against Everton. So
yeah.
But I think the fact that we're expecting rotation from Chelsea, I think Mendy's probably one of the only players, maybe 2 or 3 more, that actually play both games.
Yeah, but if there's rotation, sorry to interject, I was just going to say, but if there is rotation, if Mendy's keeping goal in front of Chalobah and Christensen as opposed to Rudiger and Reece James, does that make his clean sheet potential better or worse?
Well, exactly. I mean, a team's confidence can, be a really pivotal factor in the game, and it seems like it's low at the moment. So maybe bringing in a Chelsea player, regardless of who it is, might not be the best idea. As you said earlier, prioritising Liverpool and City players, probably the way to go. But yes, I think we just got to roll with Ramsdale and see what happens. Maybe he can get some save points. Maybe he can actually keep some saves out, and give us a clean sheet. That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Note my frustration with him in recent weeks. But yes, arguably Saka is a captain option this week. He's been so consistent, and what a player!
Yeah, Saka's been great. I mean, every single game week it passes, he gets a decent return, and then there are question marks around his fitness. He gets a yellow flag, and we have this discussion about, is he injured? No, he's just fatigued. He's just managing him. The fatigue that he's built up across the season. No doubt it's a good fixture for Arsenal, Leeds and Tottenham away. But I just think that Saka and De Bruyne, even Son, I'd be happy to captain Son over Saka this game week. I just think those guys are more reliable, more consistent, more explosive. Saka's great. I just don't think he's in that tier. I think the graph that we saw before, his returns have been okay, but I don't think that they've been as consistent in terms of returns versus starts as some of the other players like De Bruyne and Salah, for example.
Yeah, I can't remember the figures. I think he was high up on the explosive, on the double-digit haul stuff. So I think he tends to get, the 10-pointers here and there. But I think you're right. I think he was further left, which means he's less reliable, not returning every single game. It seems like he has done recently, but maybe that's just my perception. But yeah, we have gone back. I think it was 10 game weeks a period. So yeah, but very happy to own him at the end of the day. I just want to ask you about the 2 more players. We've got Mount and Coutinho here.
Yeah.
Mount, I think, is probably more sure to start both games for Chelsea. One of those key players that probably can consistently play. Are you're not in your wildest dreams going to transfer him out for someone else? Have you not considered that?
Oh, I definitely considered going Mount to Foden. I think Foden in isolation is a better asset than Mount this game week. But is it worth a -4 when Mount has Leicester and then Watford, I think, in game week 38? I mean, they're great fixtures for Chelsea. Mason Mount will likely play those fixtures. I just don't know if it's worth going Mount to Foden. I still think Mount's a great asset, even if he just plays the one game. Coutinho, interestingly enough, I'm probably more likely to sell Coutinho than Mason Mount.
Oh, you
I know
can't sell
Coutinho's. I know that's what I'm saying. I'm not keen on selling either of them. But if I was to pull the trigger on one, it would probably be Coutinho. The double's not great. He doubles next week, so that's the reason I'd like to hold Coutinho. Game week 38, they play City. That's a tough game. Yeah, I think they're not ideal, Coutinho and Mount. I would rather have, we'll look at your team in a minute. I would rather have your midfield. I'd rather have Foden in there, for example, but I'm just not sure whether Coutinho or Mount to Foden is worth a -4.
Everyone says this about my team. You'd rather have my midfield, but I haven't owned Son for the last 8 game weeks, so I'd rather have Son's points, please. That would be nice. But yeah, how are you going to shape up for game week 37? Because without a free hit, you're going to have limited potential to get double game week players in. Who are going to be the key guys that you go for?
Yeah, I'm not too concerned actually about having single game week players in 37. I think looking at the teams like City and Arsenal and Liverpool play Southampton away. That's a great fixture for Liverpool. Having a look at City's fixture, they've got West Ham away. That might be a more difficult game. Tottenham play Burnley at home. I've already got Son. Chelsea play Leicester at home. I think that's a decent fixture. So I'm not too concerned about having single game week players in game week 37. We're comparing them to the likes of Crystal Palace and Everton and Burnley and Aston Villa. I'm not that frightened of those teams. Yeah. I'm probably looking at a Zaha, but again, how do I fit Zaha into this team? That would mean removing a Mason Mount, and I'm just not sure I want to do that in game week 37. So yeah, at this stage, I'm actually content with having only 2 or 3 double game week players in 37. I think that my single game week players, Liverpool against Southampton, City against West Ham, Chelsea against Leicester, I think they can match them. Spurs against Burnley as well.
Neil's asking in the chat, what about Jesus? Can you fit him in? Could be a decent punt if he continues to play in the Premier League. Because I think Pep is like, he gives these chances to players. And once they continue to return, which is what Jesus is doing, I think he's like 8.5, isn't he? And how much is Vegas that you're selling? What, 6.5, something like that?
Yeah, something like that, 6.4. Yeah, FPL Spartans in the chat, I'm saying that I'm hiding behind the sofa for game week 37. I don't know about that. I mean, I'm not too scared, as I said, of Everton and Villa and Burnley and Palace. Jesus, definitely tempted by Jesus. It's one of those things. I think I'll pay attention to what Luke says with City's predicted lineups. I'll see how Jesus plays in the Champions League. I mean, who's probably the greatest threat to Jesus? He can play on the right. He can play through the middle. At the moment, you'd say probably Sterling or Foden if he chooses to play Foden through the middle, but he's been playing Foden out left a little bit recently as well. Yeah, so I don't know if Jesus has too much competition right now for those spots when he's playing as well as he is. And I could afford to go Weghorst to Jesus. I just probably have to downgrade one of my defenders, like downgrade a Cody to someone like a Tavares from Arsenal, or maybe someone a little bit cheaper from Leicester. I haven't really looked at the cheap defenders. All focus has been on the big at the back.
If you do like a -12, there could be like a chance to downgrade like a Mount maybe to someone. Like find another way to do it. But obviously don't
Gordon.
Yeah. I mean, don't tear your team apart. I mean, Gordon might be a good move because they've got the double, haven't they, Everton?
Yeah.
So, have a tinker, see what you can find. I don't mind the Nketiah move, though. He's looked decent for Arsenal and looks like he'll keep his place. So, yeah, I think you're going to be deciding between like a -4 and a -12, and that's quite exciting.
Basically.
Be interesting to see what you come up with. But yeah, keep us updated with it on Twitter. I'm going to move on to my team. And same formation as Ryan, 4-5-1 for the benefit of the podcast listeners. Ramsdale in goal, Alexander-Arnold, Robertson, Alonso, Laporte, no Cancelo. That's the guy I'm going to be worrying about this week. Salah, Havertz, Saka, Foden, and transferring in De Bruyne. Haven't done that yet, but I'm looking to do it. The captain armband is on De Bruyne as well. And in order to enable that move, Kane will be moving down to Richarlison. And I've got to say, I'm pretty happy with this team. It looks good. It looks like a free hit team to a certain extent. Who are the biggest worries here? The Spurs guys, probably, and maybe Cancelo. But, I mean, I'm not too worried because the Spurs guys, obviously, on paper, their fixtures are difficult, and Cancelo hasn't really proven recently that he can regularly outscore Laporte by scoring like loads and loads of attacking returns. I think Laporte gives me value. But yeah, I'm not looking for compliments. I know it's a good looking team. That move is for a -4. You know, I've got to make the most of it while I can. And a free hit in 37 also sorts me out for that. So fast forwarding to game week 38, I think the only player that really struggles, I think, is Richarlison for a fixture, because I think he plays Spurs. And is it Arsenal? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's Arsenal. It's Arsenal. Yeah,
Arsenal.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether I mind holding on to Richarlison actually, because if Everton are still, battling to stay in the Premier League, I think Richarlison's still a great hold, and maybe the top race for the top 4 is over by then. Who knows? So maybe Arsenal aren't too worried about that game. But I wouldn't even be adverse to like moving De Bruyne back down to Son, for example, against Norwich, while City, I think, have Aston Villa at home on the final day of the season. It would be interesting to see what the state of play is with the title race at that point. But I've got options to manoeuvre, free hit at 37. Hopefully, I'm able to capitalise on this double game week.
I love your team, Ted. I think it's incredible. You've got the triple Liverpool and the triple City. I think that's the key this double game week. The triple Liverpool, triple City. Havertz, a potential concern there. I mean, we've spoken a little bit about his minutes. Probably unlikely he starts both.
Yeah, I really don't know. I think he's been playing regularly, hasn't he? And Gianni seems to be a major advocate for Havertz. He was right that he started this game week. I mean, Tuchel could have definitely changed the team when he was very, very critical that Havertz was missing his chances. He didn't. Havertz continued to miss his chances, and it might get to a point where Tuchel just has to make a point and says, "You're not doing enough for me." Lukaku comes in. So, yeah, I'm worried about Havertz. I think he's the big hole in this team. But if he starts both, I think those are really good fixtures for Chelsea. I'd be very happy owning. Let's see what happens. Otherwise, if he gets dropped for both, I've got Connor Cody coming off the bench for his -4 points. Wolves double game week is so hard. I think it's one of the hardest I've seen.
Yeah.
Chelsea, Man City, nightmare.
Yeah. And this is the benefit of having the free hit in game week 37, is that you don't need to think about Villa or Crystal Palace, Burnley. You can just focus on Liverpool and City, Chelsea as well, Arsenal. You've got pretty much the representation from just the top 4 here, apart from Richarlison. So having that free hit in 37 allows you to just go all in on this double game week. And Liverpool, City, Chelsea, they've got good fixtures in 38 and they're good teams. So I think you've maximised the benefit of the free hit. It's not just for 37, it's also for the weeks preceding.
Yeah, I was patient keeping the free hit, but I've suffered. I didn't use it in 33, definitely could have. And I think that week I got a major red arrow. So not good. It just shows that you could just do a completely chip strategy and have different fires to fight. But I'm happy that I'm sort of sorted until the end of the season, really. But hopefully that top 10k finish can be realistic.
Yeah. How far away are you? How many points outside?
Good question. I think it's about 10 points, maybe even less than that. So
wow,
I'm
it's congested up there.
Yeah, it is. 11,000 is what I'm on. I think I'm probably going to move down to 12,000 at the end of this, because I think my auto subs don't. I've got who is it? I think it's Cody coming in for a 0, so that's not good. I think other auto subs are better than that. So yeah. A question actually, Ryan. If Richarlison is ruled out because of any sort of misdemeanor with the flare thing, I need to bring in a forward for 7.9 million or less. Who would be your major alternative to Richarlison? We're looking at Villa, maybe. We're looking at
Yeah.
Pookie, maybe. I don't know. It's difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think the fact that you're free hitting in 37 rules Watkins out for me. I wouldn't want an Aston Villa striker in this double game week. They've got Burnley, which is okay, and then they've got Liverpool. You can free hit them in next game week. So I wouldn't be too concerned with that. 7.9, did you say? So you can't stretch. You've already got your 3 City. You couldn't stretch to Gabriel Jesus.
No.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, I think it depends on what can you do with the rest of the cash. Like if you went to an Nketiah, for example, what can you do with the saving there? Because the rest of your team looks pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'll go down to Nketiah. I wonder how much Danny Ings is. Is he like, oh, he's 7.7. I could have a little punt on Danny Ings. Could be a major differential. It might be complete rubbish and, fall flat in its face because he hasn't proven that he can start game in, game out.
Yeah.
But you never know. If there aren't too many options and I'm choosing between Ings and Watkins, might be quite tasty.
Yeah, I'd go for Ings over Watkins. It's just, as we've said, like if you bring him into your team, he's going to be sitting there in game week 38. And you'll have an issue to deal with there. Like they're playing City in 38. You can just get the Villa guys in a free hit in 37. So personally, if I had that money, I wouldn't want to go for a Watkins or a Danny Ings. How great is the double? Burnley and Liverpool.
Burnley away and Liverpool. Yeah, not too good. So I'm just going to hope that Richarlison doesn't get a ban because I think he's the obvious transfer this week.
He is, yeah.
Yeah, what are your final thoughts about Salah captain versus De Bruyne captain? Because I think I'm going to be swapping that armband once I make the transfer, over and over again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like this week, for example, all week I was set on Son captain. I just thought that fixture was better for Son. I wasn't swayed by the 0 shots on target versus Brentford and Brighton. I didn't think Salah would be rested. I thought Salah would start the game against Newcastle. I just thought that he might come off a little bit earlier. I just thought Newcastle at home is a more difficult fixture, and there's not much to separate Son and Salah right now. Of course, Liverpool are still a better attacking team, but I don't know. I was just always set on that. I wasn't scared of Salah. I wasn't scared of his effective ownership. And so if I had De Bruyne and Salah in my team, I'd probably feel the same way about De Bruyne. Newcastle at home and Wolves away are 2 excellent fixtures. Newcastle at St James's Park are a different team to the one that they are away from home. Fabian Schär might have picked up a knock as well. I don't know if that impacts things. Jamal Lascelles isn't exactly the same player for Newcastle. And then Wolves are atrocious right now. Like I was looking up their defensive data. In the last 6 game weeks, Wolves' minutes per expected goals conceded is 45, which is the 3rd worst in the league. Norwich, just by way of contrast, Norwich is 44 minutes per expected goal conceded. So Norwich and Wolves right now statistically have almost the same minutes per goal conceded, which is the 2nd and 3rd worst in the league. So yeah, I think I've done a poor job of explaining that. But what I'm trying to say is that Wolves suck.
You know what? I kind of like owning Havertz for that Wolves game. And the glimmer of hope is because he's for some reason he's playing 70 minutes and he's regularly been taken off on the 70-minute mark. That kind of gives me a little bit of hope that he plays 2 70-minute appearances this week. Maybe someone who has the tendency to play 90 minutes, like a Werner. No, Werner doesn't. Like a Mount. Maybe he plays 1. Maybe he doesn't. Obviously, I don't want to wish ill will onto you, but
yeah, back off my players.
I mean, who knows? Even if I just get Wolves from Havertz, maybe I'm happy with that. Who knows? There was in the chat. Someone was saying Iheanacho as a forward option, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting one. But I was thinking actually Vardy's back, and I don't know whether they play 2 up top. But he got his goal at the weekend, Iheanacho, didn't he? So could be another left field choice. It seems like everyone in the chat is going, just go Nketiah and go Nketiah. But I'm like, how on earth? I don't want 3 million left in the bank or whatever it is. It might be 2 million, but
Yeah, you won't benefit from that, right? Because you've got the free hit next week. So it's not
Yeah.
like having that money in the bank really allows you to do anything exciting. It's so depressing, the forward options right now. I mean, we're talking about Richarlison or Nketiah for a double game week. It's not great, is it?
I wonder whether I can. This all depends if Richarlison's out, because if he is definitely playing, then these are almost certainly the moves I'm going to be making. But if
Yeah.
he's not, then I probably could try and do a little bit of wiggling and keep maybe Kulusevski and move Havertz out for De Bruyne, and maybe I've got enough cash to like even keep Kane, for example.
Yeah, okay.
That probably isn't viable, but I'll have a think.
Mm.
But in any case, happy with the team. Fingers crossed for another decent game week. And more importantly, hopefully Man United players don't do that much damage tonight, because that's the
Yeah.
last game of the game week.
Yeah, it's really Ronaldo, right? I mean, we kind of want to. Well, as a United fan, I'd love a 2-1 United win with Fred McDouble. That'd be nice.
Oh dear. Yeah, Abdul in the chat saying Vardy party. Oh, I mean, that's an interesting one. Like, I know that Leicester are caught up in Europe and Vardy hasn't exactly had that much minutes recently. I could go Vardy. That would be, I'm going to whisper it, but
Yeah, I think he's a potential free hit option in 37.
yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Vardy, oh, it's sad, isn't it? I mean, I think this is probably the last season we have Vardy as an option in FPL, unless he's priced at like 6.5 or 7.5 next season. He's just, at the moment, he's just too expensive, too injury prone, and he's getting on a bit, poor old Vardy.
Yeah, Dreaded FPL in the chat saying Tony Brace tonight. I wouldn't be surprised. He's in good form.
Tony.
One of the single game week players that we have largely been ignoring, and has been in really good form. So maybe I wouldn't be adverse to going to a single game week striker. Like, who knows? FPL Spartans.
Antonio plays Norwich.
Oh yeah, my goodness. Yeah, that's actually not a bad shout. Even though Antonio hasn't scored since, like, I don't even know. Like, it's been a long time. Let's just say that. FPL Spartans in the chat saying it's price snobbery why people won't go for Nketiah, and I kind of agree with that, to be honest.
Yeah,
I'm a massive snob, so I don't know. It's stupid logic that why would you leave money in the bank and that be an issue when you can get just the best player, regardless of whether he's 5 million or 10 million. If Nketiah is the best player, just get him and leave the money in the bank. I kind of get it. I need to get over that psychology thing though. Tough.
I think there's legitimate concern that he doesn't play both games in the double. I think right now that he does, but you can't say for sure that he plays both of those games in the double game week, Leeds and Tottenham. I mean, like Lacazette still could get some minutes in those games.
Yeah, absolutely. Bowen going under the radar as well, especially against Norwich.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're just blindsided by the double game week, and I think this game week of all double game weeks, you just have to go all in, I think. Don't compromise.
Minus 12, just do it.
Right, I think we will leave it there, chaps. Thanks everyone for joining us. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it. Lots of effort went into making this video. Appreciate it. Appreciate your support. Thanks to you, Ryan, for joining me once again. Best of luck for game week 36, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. Good to see everyone in the chat. Take care.
Yeah. All the best, guys. See you later.